CSGO is in one of the worst states it's been in a very long time, and not because of overpowered guns, a bad economy system, or goofy gunplay, but rather because of something else. Something much worse. What's going on, ProGuides fam? I'm Boggs, and today we'll be talking about the current state of Counter-Strike, why the player count is declining, and what can be done to fix it. Let's not waste any more time and get into it. So what's happening, and what can Valve do about it? Ever since February, Counter-Strike has been consistently losing more and more players, and the game's problems have only gotten worse and worse. Why? Well, there's a lot of reasons, obviously, but one of the bigger ones is the massive cheater problem that CSGO is facing. CSGO has always had cheaters. I mean, in such a competitive game, you'd expect it, right? But in CSGO, even historically, cheaters have always played the game more than others. Having a couple of cheaters isn't a problem as long as the vast majority of games are clean, but lately in Counter-Strike, that hasn't been the case. Especially in matchmaking. At the moment, the game has an alarming amount of cheaters, which makes the game even harder to get into than it already is. In Counter-Strike, the skill gap between an experienced player versus a new one is truly massive, and that's great for making the game fun to play and grind over a long amount of time, as there's always people clearly better than you. But it also does mean that the game is more difficult to get into, especially if there aren't many new players joining you. Getting stomped by players significantly better than you is never really fun, and it is a huge boundary for new players to get past. I'm sure you've experienced it if you just started out, or even if you played against a big smurf, and with the amount of comments we get complaining about it, I think it's widely accepted that those kinds of experiences aren't all that enjoyable, like ever. But that situation is the reality with most skill-based games already. There's going to be a lot of people better than you, and it's going to take a while for the game to find balanced opponents. Basically, we haven't even talked about the real boundary, and that being cheaters. If you don't think playing against smurfs is fun, try cheaters instead. Not that we'd recommend it, but I'm sure you realize how much worse that is. Of course, though, if you're struggling to improve as fast as you hoped you would, whether that's to play ranked or reach that next rank up, make sure you check out ProGuides.com. There are high-ranked coaches we'll be able to find and fix your mistakes and help you improve at a record speed. Whenever we talk about the cheater problem, people often mention trust factor, and how you should just have a good trust factor, and it shouldn't be a problem. And I suppose that's fair. Cheaters in matchmaking might not be a big problem in high trust factor, but that doesn't mean cheaters aren't a problem. Good trust factor is only good trust factor because there's very few players in it. The vast majority of players are in average trust factor, and the new players start out in low trust factor. And as it turns out, low trust factor is a hell. In low trust factor, it's unfortunately not at all uncommon to see cheaters in about half of your games. A lot of the time, even multiple cheaters in a single game. A lot of these cheaters pretend to be legit players, although they're usually bad at hiding it. But also a good amount of these players will literally just spin bot anyway and do whatever they desire. As a new or even average trust factor player facing cheaters, every other game is not fun at all. It means that half of the games are literally unplayable, and the other half still has a good chance to be an unbalanced match with smurfs, trolls, or other nonsense. Basically, not the most enjoyable experience. And speaking of the entry barrier, we haven't even talked about CSGO essentially reverting free to play. I'm sure a lot of you noticed, but recently CSGO made the most fun aspect of Counter-Strike, namely ranks, a pay-to-play feature. But not only that, they also cut out anyone that previously was allowed to play ranked, but didn't reach level 21 yet, forcing them to pay up quickly or lose all of their progress. Not the best way to handle your new players. Not only has this made it so that there is less people coming to try the game, but it also pisses off everyone with a level between 5 and 20, as in they now need to pay for their previously free game. Of course, you always get people saying, and who cares that matchmaking is unplayable? You could just play Face It or ESEA instead. And while that's true, that doesn't really help new players or having a healthy player base. If you're in Silver or Gold Nova, or perhaps even newer and don't yet have a competitive rank, it's true that you can indeed play Face It or ESEA, but you're most likely going to get outskilled by pretty much everyone. Basically, everyone in your games except you will be a smurf, and you'll probably end up feeling pretty helpless. Face It pugs are great, but I'm sure I can speak for pretty much everyone here watching by saying that's not where we started out. We all started playing matchmaking and eventually moved to other platforms, or perhaps you haven't even moved to other platforms yet. Basically, especially for newer or lower skilled players, these other platforms aren't really an option, and thus this isn't the solution either. And of course, even if you do play Face It, having a secondary platform to play on when you don't feel like sweating as much, or even to play with friends which you're scared might throw your Face It game otherwise is great. Nowadays, whenever I feel like playing Counter-Strike but don't want to play against sweaty level 10s that'll do whatever is humanly possible just to win a measly 25 elo, I'll just hop on a community server. Sometimes I'll play Deathmatch, other times I play KZ or Surf, and sometimes I even play on community servers that run competitive 5v5s, but just on 128 tick servers and no cheaters. In those scenarios, I'd much rather just play a quick game of matchmaking, but I can't be bothered playing with and against cheaters for an hour, so I go for something less risky instead, so I can ensure I'll actually enjoy my time playing. Before we move on though, let's quickly go over our question of the day. Today's question being, how do you feel about the current state of the game? I think it's clear how I feel about it and how disappointed I am, but what do you think? Make sure to comment down below and tell us why. Anyway, let's get back into the video. This problem stems at least largely from the anti-cheat that CSGO is guarded by, namely VAC. VAC is an anti-cheat that's quite old and also unique. It bans people based on signature keys, which is something that most anti-cheats have long surpassed. Basically, every program or software you run will have its own signature keys so that you can identify what program it is. VAC checks these signature keys, and if it knows the signature as a cheat, they'll ban you after some time for using it. VAC will not ban instantly, especially if it's a newer cheat. And if it's an old cheat that's free to download and known by a large part of the cheater community, you can expect to get banned after a few hours of using it. Not because it takes a few hours to detect it, but just because those are the shorter detection to ban cooldowns. If it's a newer cheat that Valve has managed to detect though, they'll wait quite a long time, sometimes even months before they actually proceed to ban you. The reason for that is because they want to catch as many people in these ban waves as possible, and also to make VAC harder to counter. If you don't know when exactly VAC detects the cheat, it's a lot harder to realize what caused it. And if you've been using multiple cheats, it's also hard to pinpoint which one was the one that got you banned. It does also mean that even if someone is using a known cheat, they'll be able to continue ruining games anywhere from a couple of hours to a couple of months. The signature detection system also has another downside though, and that is that the anti-cheat is incredibly easy to bypass. If the code of the cheat you're running is unique, you won't receive a ban probably ever. And although I won't ever tell you how to do that, as we at ProGuides don't condone cheaters, trust me when I say that it's way too easy and requires no coding experience whatsoever. The only thing that VAC really is able to catch are free cheats that you just download off a shady website, or cheap paid cheats that aren't doing a great job preventing the measures of the anti-cheat. Some of the more popular paid cheats have remained undetected for years, and VAC does not seem to be closing in on them anytime soon. Honestly, talking about this in the state of VAC is just kind of depressing. Valve really is not doing a good job on it, and the results are clear. It's commonly believed that VAC is bad because CSGO is an old game, but that's not true. Third-party matchmakers such as FaZe and ESEA are able to have quite a good anti-cheat on their games, and you don't see cheaters nearly as much as you do in regular matchmaking. What is the true reason that VAC is so bad though has everything to do with privacy. Valve made VAC with privacy in mind, and honestly that doesn't really work all that well. For one, Valve doesn't actually look at what programs you're running and instead only looks at the signatures. But VAC isn't a ring zero anti-cheat like that of FaZe or ESEA and Valorant, meaning that it does not scan for cheats as the PC boots. Privacy is always a touchy subject, especially when it's for a gamed anti-cheat. But at least for me personally, I would rather have Valve log my data than run into cheaters in almost every matchmaking game I play. I personally think Valorant and Riot did a great job on the anti-cheat, and CSGO could learn a lot from it. Basically, CSGO is a huge cheater problem and Valve are the only ones that can fix it. It really is a simple question of good anti-cheat, and VAC right now is not cutting it. CSGO is a great game, but the longer Valve leaves matchmaking in the state, the lower the odds are that new players will continue coming on in, especially if they have to pay for it. But unfortunately, there's more. Aside from just cheaters, Valve has also been especially lazy with updates in the last few years. When Valorant got released, there was a short period where they were clearly putting in the time and effort, but that shortly went away almost as if Valve had given up. I was really happy to see Valve try so much harder as soon as Valorant came out, and I was glad to see the competition actually worked out. Only for a short while though, as I'm sure you've noticed it's now been a while since we got any exciting updates to speak of. Even the pro scene right now isn't doing too hot. First of all, the pro scene has been really dry as of late with the exception of Cologne. Ever since tournaments went online, it's become more and more common for tournaments to run across each other, meaning that on rare occasions, teams will literally play each other twice on the same day, just in a different tournament. Which not only is super confusing to viewers, but also goes to show how often you could watch good games. If tournaments run literally through each other, it's hard to generate hype for all the matches, or even keep track of how each team is doing. Cologne on LAN was definitely a good way to end before the player break, and it's definitely an exception to what we just talked about, but I hope we can get to see that more often again. Lastly, now that we're talking about pro play anyway, the North American scene is at an all-time low. There's not a single NA team in the HLTV top 10 at the moment, and the highest rated team for NA is Liquid at number 13, and they themselves are currently bootcamping in Europe to have a better level of practice. The only North American team to ever get a major, Cloud9, currently left CS and they don't even have a team. Other top teams in NA such as Bad News Bears aren't even able to find an org that'll pay their salaries, and half the tier 2 scene has moved to Valorant. It's reasonably safe to say that NACS is quite dead at the moment, but I truly do hope the entire game doesn't follow suit. Csgo definitely can get fixed, and we're not even asking for an update schedule like that of Valorant. But we do need to see some improvements to anti-cheat, tournament structure, and hopefully servers. I definitely haven't given up on CS, but if Valve does let it die, it wouldn't be the first time. Looking at you, TF2. Either way, I hope you enjoyed today's video and perhaps even agreed on some of the points we were making. If you did, make sure to smash that like button and don't forget to subscribe, and we'll be seeing you in the next one. Peace.